In Courtroom 5, Central Federal Courthouse. Dr. Evelyn Hayes stood frozen, the breath caught in her chest. Her arms were wrenched behind her back with unyielding force, now secured tightly by gleaming steel handcuffs. A sharp pain shot from her wrists to her shoulders, but the physical agony was nothing compared to the shock, outrage, and utter disbelief flooding her mind. She, the Associate Attorney General of the United States, being handcuffed like a common criminal, inside a federal courtroom, her impeccably tailored charcoal gray business suit, sophisticated ivory silk blouse, and elegant heels, all projecting quiet professionalism and authority, now stood in stark, humiliating contrast to the hands cuffed behind her back. Her face, usually a mask of calm intelligence befitting a high-ranking legal mind and leader, was now taut, her lips pressed into a thin line, desperately trying to contain the fury threatening to erupt. Court Security Officer Marcus Cole, a bald, heavily muscled man around 40, whose biceps strained against his white uniform shirt, was the one pinning her arms and had just snapped the cuffs shut. His expression was tense as he glanced at the others in the courtroom, but he maintained a firm demeanor, following orders. Standing directly opposite Dr. Hayes, arms crossed, face etched with arrogance and annoyance, was Court Security Officer Rick Snyder. Also around 40, Snyder had short military-style blonde hair and a perpetually scowling, weathered face. He was the one who had ordered Cole to take this unbelievable action. "What in God's name do you think you're doing?" Dr. Hayes's voice rang out, strained but still carrying its natural authority despite her attempt at calm. "Release me immediately. This is completely unlawful. You have absolutely no authority to handcuff me." "Unlawful?" Snyder scoffed, a sneer full of contempt and defiance. He took a step closer to Dr. Hayes. "You're the one violating court rules, causing a disturbance, failing to obey a lawful order, resisting inside the courtroom. That's more than enough grounds to throw you out of here." "I wasn't causing a disturbance. I merely asked you to maintain order," Dr. Hayes shot back, her voice steely. "You were the ones being loud and disrespectful in this solemn space." "You dare tell us we were being loud?" Snyder roared, his face flushed red with anger and wounded pride. "Who the hell do you think you are lecturing us?" And resisting on top of it. "Cole, get her out of this courtroom. Throw her straight out onto the street where she belongs." Snyder and Cole began forcefully pushing Dr. Hayes toward the heavy wooden doors leading to the main corridor, doors through which lawyers, judges, and the public would soon pass to begin the day's session. This brutal and absurd act unfolded before the stunned eyes of a few early arriving lawyers, court staff, and family members. They exchanged glances, whispering amongst themselves, unable to comprehend what was happening, why a well-dressed black woman was being treated like a dangerous criminal right inside the courtroom. It had all started about 10 minutes earlier, when Courtroom 5 was still relatively empty and quiet, preparing for an important upcoming trial. Dr. Evelyn Hayes, Associate Attorney General of the United States, had arrived a little before the scheduled start time. She wanted to be present discreetly, unannounced, to personally observe the proceedings of a complex and sensitive civil rights case involving allegations of systemic discrimination within a local government agency. Given her position at the Department of Justice, ensuring that civil rights trials were conducted fairly, objectively, and lawfully was a crucial part of her responsibilities. She had chosen a professional but understated business suit, hoping to blend into the public gallery without drawing undue attention. She selected a seat in the front row of the public section, near the center aisle, opened her leather briefcase, and began reviewing some case-related documents she had prepared. The atmosphere in the courtroom was appropriately solemn, with only the rustle of papers and the soft clicking of a keyboard from the clerk's desk breaking the silence. However, that quiet was soon shattered by the increasingly loud conversation between two court security officers huddled near a staff-only side door across the room. It was Rick Snyder and Marcus Cole. Both men, around 40, had worked security at the courthouse for years, but seemed to lack much enthusiasm or ambition for advancement. Snyder, with his short blonde hair and constant scowl, did most of the talking, incessantly complaining about work schedules, pay, difficult lawyers, and annoying defendants. Cole, bald and burly, mostly listened, occasionally chiming in with a grunt of agreement or a crude remark. Their conversation grew louder, centering on the results of the previous weekend's football game, punctuated by somewhat vulgar laughter and unflattering comments about the losing team. Their volume became disruptive, noticeably affecting the courtroom's necessary decorum and causing a few lawyers reviewing files to frown in annoyance. Dr. Hayes tried to focus on her documents, but the officers' boisterous talk made it impossible. She felt indignant at their lack of professionalism and awareness in a place demanding respect and order. After a few minutes of trying futilely to ignore it, she decided she had to say something. She closed her files, quietly stood up, and approached Snyder and Cole. Maintaining a respectful distance, she smiled politely and spoke in a soft, courteous tone. "Excuse me for interrupting, officers." Though they were security guards, she habitually used officers out of respect for law enforcement roles. "I know court isn't officially in session yet, but the atmosphere needs to remain quiet and respectful for everyone to concentrate. Would you mind lowering your voices just a bit, please? Thank you." Dr. Hayes's comment was perfectly polite, appropriate, and reasonable. But for Rick Snyder, a man harboring latent prejudices and an arrogant attitude, being lectured on rules by a member of the public, especially a black woman, on his turf, was an unacceptable insult. He immediately bristled. "Who the hell do you think you are, coming over here giving us orders?" Snyder puffed up, his tone defiant and irritated. "This is a courtroom, our workplace. We'll talk how we want. If you don't like it, you can take yourself right outside." Cole, standing beside him, looked momentarily surprised by Snyder's harsh reaction, but then smirked, crossing his arms in a show of solidarity with his colleague. Dr. Hayes was taken aback by the crude and unprofessional response, but she maintained her composure. "I'm not giving orders, officer. I made a polite request. And I believe everyone present in this courtroom, staff or public, has a responsibility to maintain the necessary decorum and order." She looked Snyder directly in the eye. "Your attitude and language just now were entirely inappropriate." "Inappropriate?" Snyder sneered sarcastically. He looked her up and down, his scrutinizing gaze lingering on her expensive suit. "What do you know about appropriate? Probably just another lawyer here to argue some nonsense for criminals, right? Or maybe a defendant's family member here to cause trouble?" He deliberately used accusatory and demeaning language. At this point, Dr. Hayes's patience completely ran out. She could not remain silent in the face of such blatant disrespect. "I am here as a citizen concerned with justice, with the right to be present at a public trial," she stated, her voice turning colder, sharper. "And I demand that you conduct yourselves appropriately as representatives of this court's discipline and order. If you cannot control your own behavior, I request to speak to your immediate supervisor." "Call a supervisor?" Snyder burst out laughing, a sound full of contempt. "Who do you think you are, demanding to see our boss? Just some black woman dressed up fancy thinks she can give orders?" The racism was now blatant, undisguised. "Looks to me like you're the one causing trouble, intentionally provoking public servants. I demand to see your identification immediately for inspection." He made a completely baseless and unwarranted demand. Dr. Hayes stood tall, facing Snyder, her gaze unwavering. "I will not be showing you any identification under these circumstances. Your demand is unlawful. Your behavior is what constitutes disturbance and harassment of a citizen right here in the courthouse." Her firm resistance, fearless demeanor, and sharp, accurate identification of his misconduct pushed Snyder over the edge. He felt utterly humiliated in front of his colleague and the few others in the room. His self-perceived authority was being openly challenged. He had to do something to crush this defiance, to reassert his dominance. "You dare accuse me of harassment?" He ground his teeth, face crimson. "You dare disobey a court officer inside the courtroom?" He shrieked, his voice cracking with rage. "I order you to leave this courtroom immediately. Get out. If you don't, I'll arrest you for disturbing the peace and obstructing an officer." Dr. Hayes remained rooted to the spot, motionless. She crossed her arms, looking directly at Snyder with defiant eyes. "I am going nowhere. I have the right to remain here." This steadfastness was the final straw for Snyder's patience, or rather, his ego. He couldn't tolerate it any longer. He turned to Cole, who also looked tense as the situation escalated. "Cole!" Snyder bellowed. "What are you waiting for? Grab her, cuff her, and get her the hell out of my sight. Hurry up before the judge arrives." Cole, despite a fleeting moment of hesitation upon seeing Dr. Hayes's resolute manner and somewhat unusual presence, yielded to Snyder's forceful command and angry glare, combined with his own ingrained habit of obedience. He lunged forward, grabbing Dr. Hayes's arm. She tried to pull away. "Don't touch me!" "Resisting?" Snyder yelled. "Cuff her!" And so, Marcus Cole used his brute strength to restrain Dr. Hayes, wrench her arms behind her back, and lock them tight with the cold steel handcuffs. The abuse of power and discrimination had reached its peak, right inside the space meant to be the sanctuary of justice. Handcuffed and facing the imminent threat of being dragged out of the courtroom like a felon, Dr. Evelyn Hayes knew she could no longer remain silent about her identity. The situation had become far too serious. This wasn't just a personal affront or an interruption of her crucial oversight work for the Department of Justice. It was an insult to the very justice system she served. As Snyder and Cole tried to shove her toward the main entrance, she dug her heels in, resisting with all her might while protesting more forcefully, her voice echoing through the courtroom, now buzzing with whispers. "You are committing felony unlawful arrest and gross abuse of authority," she declared loudly, her voice steely and commanding. "Your actions will not be overlooked. You will face legal consequences." "Consequences?" Snyder sneered, trying to appear unfazed, though perhaps a flicker of unease stirred within him at the growing attention. "Who do you think you are to threaten us? What can someone like you do? Move it!" He shoved Dr. Hayes hard in the back. The commotion and the sight of a well-dressed black woman being handcuffed and manhandled by 2 court security officers had captured everyone's attention. Lawyers stopped reviewing files, looking up with astonishment and confusion. Other court staff in corners appeared bewildered. Family members whispered, some showing clear disapproval. The pretrial solemnity was utterly shattered. Just at the peak of the tension and chaos, as Snyder and Cole had nearly dragged Dr. Hayes to the courtroom doors, a deep, authoritative voice boomed from the direction of the bench. "Stop right there!" Everyone in the courtroom, including Snyder and Cole, flinched and turned. The heavy wooden door behind the judge's bench had swung open unnoticed. Judge Robert Harrison, clad in his formal black robe, stood there, his face a mixture of surprise and extreme displeasure as he surveyed the chaotic scene unfolding in his courtroom just minutes before the session was due to begin. "What is going on here?" Judge Harrison demanded sternly, his sharp eyes sweeping over the 2 officers and the woman they were restraining. "Why is there this noise and disorder?" Snyder and Cole instinctively released Dr. Hayes, snapping to attention, their faces paling with shock and fear at the judge's sudden appearance. Your Honor, Judge Harrison," Snyder stammered, trying to regain composure. "It's nothing, sir. Just, this woman was causing a disturbance, failed to obey orders. We were escorting her out of the courtroom." Judge Harrison narrowed his eyes, looking more closely at the black woman standing there, hands still cuffed, her business suit slightly disheveled, but her bearing still remarkably composed. He recognized the face. one he'd seen at important legal events or in the news. Causing a disturbance? Failing to obey? Judge Harrison repeated skeptically. He took in Dr. Hayes's professional attire and calm demeanor, which didn't fit the profile of a troublemaker. What exactly did she do that required you to handcuff her and remove her from my courtroom? He stepped closer, and as his gaze met the woman's intelligent, sharp eyes, sudden recognition dawned. He froze, his expression shifting to one of utter astonishment, bordering on disbelief. "Dr. Hayes?" he uttered, his voice filled with shock and a hint of uncertainty. "Is that you, Associate Attorney General Hayes?" The name and full formal title echoed through the courtroom, causing everyone present to gasp and turn to stare at the handcuffed black woman with entirely new eyes. Associate Attorney General? For Rick Snyder and Marcus Cole, the words Associate Attorney General hit like a death sentence. Their ears rang, their faces turned deathly white, and an uncontrollable trembling seized their limbs. They exchanged looks of pure terror, realizing they hadn't just made a foolish mistake, but committed an unforgivable act, potentially sparking a major political and legal scandal. They had just handcuffed one of the most powerful legal officials in the country. Dr. Hayes, seeing the recognition in Judge Harrison's eyes, let out a discreet sigh of relief. She knew this nightmare was about to end, at least for her personally. She nodded formally. "Yes, Judge Harrison. It is I, Evelyn Hayes." She slightly extended her cuffed hands forward. "I came today under the direction of the Department of Justice to attend and observe your important hearing. Unfortunately, I encountered a rather unique welcome from these two security officers." Her voice was calm, but laced with deep sarcasm and unconcealed indignation. Judge Harrison was speechless for a moment, shocked and furious that this had happened in his courtroom to such a high-ranking official. He spun toward Snyder and Cole, who stood frozen, drained of all color. His wrath erupted. "You two!" His voice thundered through the room. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? Do you realize you just assaulted and unlawfully detained the Associate Attorney General of the United States? You imbeciles, you disgrace! You've brought shame upon this entire courthouse!" He gave them no chance to explain or defend themselves. He pointed furiously at the handcuffs on Dr. Hayes's wrists. "Remove those handcuffs from Associate Attorney General Hayes immediately! Immediately! Do you hear my order?" Snyder and Cole scrambled like puppets whose strings were violently jerked. Snyder fumbled for his handcuff key, his hands shaking so badly he dropped the keys, which clattered on the floor. He clumsily retrieved them, then struggled for agonizing seconds to fit the key into the lock. Click, click. The cuffs finally sprang open. Angry red marks circled Dr. Hayes's wrists, humiliating reminders of the abuse of power and prejudice she had just endured. As soon as her hands were free, almost in unison, Rick Snyder and Marcus Cole collapsed onto the cold marble floor of the courtroom, right in front of Associate Attorney General Hayes and Judge Harrison. The sudden, pathetic act stunned everyone present. "Ma'am, Associate Attorney General, please forgive our ignorance and blindness." Snyder sobbed, tears and snot streaming down his face, a stark contrast to his earlier arrogance. We truly didn't know it was you. We were blind fools. We've made an unforgivable mistake. Please have mercy." Cole, the large, muscular man, now trembled like a child, banging his forehead repeatedly on the hard floor. "Please, spare us, ma'am. We were wrong. We truly know we were wrong." He turned his pleading eyes to Judge Harrison. "Judge, please speak for us. We have families, small children. Please don't ruin our lives." The spectacle of two court security officers, symbols of order and discipline, kneeling, weeping, and begging abjectly before a black female Associate Attorney General inside a federal courtroom, witnessed by the presiding judge and dozens of others, was intensely dramatic, ironic, and unforgettable. It starkly exposed the cowardly face of abusive power when confronted with consequences, affirming that true authority lies not in uniforms or weapons, but in dignity, intellect, and justice. The tables had turned swiftly and bitterly for Rick Snyder and Marcus Cole. Judge Robert Harrison looked down sternly at the two officers groveling and sobbing on the courtroom floor. Anger and embarrassment were still etched on his face, but with the composure of a veteran judge, he quickly regained the necessary control to manage the situation. He knew this incident needed to be handled formally and by the book, not only to deliver justice for Associate Attorney General Hayes, but also to protect the integrity and reputation of the entire court system. "Get up, both of you!" Judge Harrison's voice rang out, no longer shouting in anger, but carrying a cold, irresistible authority. "Your belated remorse and tears cannot erase the serious and shameful misconduct you have just committed. Stand up and remain here pending further action." Rick Snyder and Marcus Cole shakily helped each other up, but kept their heads bowed, not daring to look anyone in the eye. They knew their pleas were futile. Judge Harrison turned to his court clerk, Ms. Miller, an efficient middle-aged woman standing nearby, her face also reflecting her shock. "Ms. Miller, please immediately contact the chambers of Chief Judge Peter Thornton and the Office of the Chief of Court Security, Captain Frank Costello. Inform them that a critical security incident has occurred in Courtroom 5, directly involving Associate Attorney General Evelyn Hayes. Request that both the Chief Judge and Captain Costello come to my chambers immediately for an urgent meeting." "Yes, Your Honor," the clerk replied and hurried off to carry out the order. Then Judge Harrison turned back to Dr. Hayes, who had fully regained her calm and professional demeanor, though the red marks on her wrists remained a painful reminder. "Associate Attorney General Hayes," he said with deep regret and respect. "Again, I offer my sincerest apologies for this appalling incident. To allow you some privacy to rest and contact your office, please accept the use of my private chambers. It will be quieter and more secure there." He signaled another court staff member to escort her. Dr. Hayes nodded gratefully. "Thank you for your kindness, Judge Harrison. I also need to report this situation to the Department of Justice immediately." She followed the staff member out of the courtroom, leaving under the silent, complex gazes of everyone remaining. Once Dr. Hayes had departed, Judge Harrison faced Snyder and Cole again. He also instructed all non-essential personnel, family members, some lawyers not yet involved, to temporarily leave the courtroom to maintain order and confidentiality during the initial handling of the matter. Only he, the two de facto defendants, a few essential court staff, and the lawyers directly involved in the upcoming hearing, who were now also key witnesses, remained. He ordered Snyder and Cole to stand quietly in a corner, under the supervision of another senior security officer who had been summoned. Within minutes, the Chief Judge of the Central Federal District Court, Peter Thornton, an older, distinguished man with white hair, and Captain Frank Costello, the robust, square-jawed Chief of Court Security, arrived in Judge Harrison's chambers. Upon hearing Judge Harrison's detailed account of the events, both men expressed profound shock and anger. They understood that this scandal not only damaged the court's reputation, but could also trigger serious legal and political repercussions. Immediately, Captain Costello ordered two senior security officers to escort Rick Snyder and Marcus Cole to the Court Security's Office of Professional Responsibility, OPR. Their badges, access cards, and any issued weapons were confiscated on the spot. They were officially placed on indefinite administrative leave pending a full investigation. Chief Judge Thornton and Captain Costello then accompanied Judge Harrison to meet personally with Associate Attorney General Hayes in the judge's chambers. The three highest-ranking court officials offered their formal, sincere, and profound apologies to AAG Hayes. They pledged a comprehensive, impartial, and rigorous investigation with the strictest disciplinary actions against the offending individuals. They also promised a thorough review of all recruitment, training, and supervision protocols for court security personnel to prevent such disgraceful incidents from ever happening again. Associate Attorney General Hayes acknowledged their goodwill and commitment. She also informed them that the Department of Justice's Office of the Inspector General, OIG, would work closely with the court's OPR throughout the investigation to ensure objectivity and compliance with federal laws, particularly civil rights statutes. The joint OPR/OIG investigation commenced immediately with unprecedented speed and thoroughness. The official statement from Associate Attorney General Hayes, as the victim and primary witness, formed the core foundation. She provided a detailed deposition, not only describing the events, but clearly analyzing the legal and ethical violations committed by Snyder and Cole. Testimonies from Judge Harrison, Clerk Miller, the lawyers, staff, and members of the public present in the courtroom were meticulously collected. All corroborated AAG Hayes' account and expressed outrage at the officer's attitudes, words, and actions. Data retrieved from the security camera system installed in the courtroom and adjacent hallway captured nearly the entire incident, from Snyder and Cole's loud conversation and the tense exchange with AAG Hayes to the handcuffing and attempted removal, and finally, the scene of them kneeling and begging when Judge Harrison appeared. This video footage became irrefutable evidence of their misconduct. The personnel files of Rick Snyder and Marcus Cole were thoroughly reviewed. Snyder's record revealed multiple past reprimands for improper conduct, complaints regarding racial bias, and disrespectful behavior towards the public, though none had resulted in severe discipline. This pointed to previous failures in management and oversight. Cole's file showed fewer issues, but the incident starkly highlighted his lack of resolve and susceptibility to being drawn into misconduct by a more senior colleague. During OPR interviews, confronted with the overwhelming and undeniable evidence, especially the security videos, and knowing there was no chance for denial or cover-up, both Snyder and Cole ultimately confessed to their wrongdoing. They admitted to acting on personal prejudice, using offensive language, making unlawful demands, unnecessarily escalating the situation, and performing the arrest and handcuffing of Associate Attorney General Hayes in a manner that was completely unlawful and an abuse of authority. Their confessions further solidified the case for decisive disciplinary action. After a brief investigation, supported by comprehensive evidence and confessions, the joint OPR/OIG investigative report was finalized. The conclusion was unequivocal. Former court security officers Rick Snyder and Marcus Cole had committed egregious and flagrant violations of professional ethics, standard operating procedures, the court's anti-discrimination policies, and federal laws concerning civil rights, unlawful arrest, and abuse of authority. Their actions not only caused severe harm to the victim, but also negatively impacted the reputation and integrity of the judiciary and public trust. The sole and inevitable recommendation was permanent termination from the federal court system. The termination orders were signed immediately by Chief of Security Costello, with Chief Judge Thornton's approval. The decision was announced throughout the court system and formally communicated to the Department of Justice. However, the consequences for Snyder and Cole didn't end with the loss of their jobs and reputations. Based on the clear criminal offenses identified during the investigation, particularly the federal crimes of deprivation of rights under color of law and unlawful arrest, the U.S. Attorney's Office decided to pursue criminal charges against both men in federal court. The legal battle was just beginning, and the two former court security officers would now face the full force of the very legal system they had once sworn to uphold. The U.S. Attorney's Office's decision to criminally prosecute former court security officers Rick Snyder and Marcus Cole sent a powerful message. No one, not even those working within the justice system, is above the law or permitted to violate the fundamental civil rights of citizens. The case was filed and proceeded to trial in the Central District Federal Court, drawing significant attention from legal professionals, civil rights organizations, and the public nationwide. It was widely viewed as a landmark case concerning abuse of power, racial bias, and the accountability of public servants. Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Ramirez, known for his success in previous civil rights cases, was assigned to lead the prosecution team. The formal indictments against Snyder and Cole remained focused on the most serious charges. 1. Deprivation of rights under color of law, emphasizing the willful violation of Associate Attorney General Hayes's right to equal treatment, freedom from racial discrimination, and freedom from unreasonable seizure, unlawful arrest. 2. Unlawful arrest, under both federal statute and potentially corresponding state law. Third assault, based on the forceful handcuffing that caused pain and left marks. The trial spanned several days, attended by numerous reporters and members of the public. Security at the courthouse was heightened. Rick Snyder and Marcus Cole appeared in court as defendants, their faces showing fatigue, anxiety, and belated remorse. They sat silently beside their defense attorneys, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Associate Attorney General Evelyn Hayes once again demonstrated her courage and commitment to justice by agreeing to testify publicly. She appeared composed, professional, and dignified. On the witness stand, she recounted the entire incident clearly and coherently, focusing on the legal elements and the violation of her civil rights. Her testimony was not merely a victim's narrative, but also the sharp analysis of a leading legal expert, exposing the wrongfulness of the defendant's actions and attitudes. She emphasized that the incident was not just personal, but served as a wake-up call about the critical need to eradicate racism and abuse of power from law enforcement systems. Her testimony had a profound impact and earned widespread empathy and respect. Federal Judge Robert Harrison was also called as a key witness, having directly intervened and observed the latter part of the incident. His testimony further corroborated AAG Hayes's account and underscored the severity of Snyder's and Cole's conduct. Prosecutor Ramirez presented an airtight case. He introduced the testimony of AAG Hayes, Judge Harrison, and other witnesses, the damning security camera footage, the detailed OPR-OIG investigation findings, and even the defendant's confessions from the internal investigation. Ramirez argued forcefully that Snyder and Cole's actions constituted a direct assault on the foundations of justice and equality, and demanded a significant sentence to ensure deterrence and restore public faith in the judicial system. The defense attorneys for Snyder and Cole had almost no way to refute the overwhelming evidence. Their strategy focused primarily on pleading for leniency. They reminded the court that the defendants had lost their careers, expressed deep remorse, and faced difficult family circumstances. They argued that prison sentences would be excessively harsh and completely destroy the lives of two men who had made a terrible mistake. They also pointed out the absence of severe physical injury. However, these arguments seemed weak against the backdrop of public outrage and the gravity of the offense. Violating the civil rights of a high-ranking official within the courthouse itself was an act that could not be easily excused. After closing arguments concluded, the federal jury retired to deliberate. It didn't take long before they returned to the courtroom with a unanimous decision. The jury foreperson stood, their voice clear and formal. On the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, we, the jury, find the defendant Rick Snyder guilty. We find the defendant Marcus Cole guilty. Guilty verdicts were also returned for the other serious charges. The final judgment was rendered. Both former court security officers were convicted. Snyder and Cole stood pale and trembling, their legs threatening to buckle. Several weeks later, the official sentencing hearing took place. The presiding federal judge, after reviewing the pre-sentence reports and hearing final arguments from both sides, delivered the sentence. The judge reiterated the seriousness of the crime, the unacceptability of abuse of power and discrimination, especially within a court setting and directed at a high-ranking judicial official. He stated that a sufficiently stern sentence was necessary to reflect the nature of the crime and ensure deterrence, while also considering mitigating factors like the defendant's job loss and expressed remorse, however late. After careful consideration of all factors, the judge announced, this court sentences Defendant Rick Snyder, 2 years incarceration. Defendant Marcus Cole, 2 years incarceration. Rick Snyder and Marcus Cole completely broke down upon hearing the sentences. They were handcuffed by U.S. Marshals and quietly led out of the courtroom to begin serving time in federal prison, paying the price for their prejudiced and wrongful actions. The termination and the 2-year prison sentences brought a just and fitting conclusion to the case. Justice was served decisively. This incident became a profound lesson for the entire court system and law enforcement agencies on the paramount importance of respecting civil rights, combating discrimination, and upholding integrity and professionalism under all circumstances. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, please hit like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful story, because tomorrow we'll have another one ready for you.